Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that the work I'm about to present has been conducted on Dambimangari country in the West Kimberley, the traditional lands of the Water people. On Yampi, we're contracted by the Department of Defence to conduct conservation land management activities, and we work very closely with the Dambimangari people to do this, and the Dambimangari Rangers on a daily basis. Unfortunately, they would have been here today if it weren't for exceptional circumstances in the Kimberley surrounding flooding, but they are very keen to get down for the next symposium. Yampi itself is about 560,000 hectares of extremely complex and incredible bush. It's about 50 kilometres northeast of Derby in the West Kimberley there. And in terms of cat management, and this is something that's been reflected right across Northern Australia, in particular in the Kimberley, a lot of work being done. Cat densities, there's almost a polarity in the cat density across the landscape. As you can see in that map, the sort of darker shading around the northern section there is far more complex rocky country, which holds less a reduced density of feral cats relative to the lowlands there. You can see that's the areas we've surveyed between 2016 on Yampi to 2022, and obviously there's a much higher occupancy and density in the lowlands there, as you can see by those red dots. So we target these areas with our management practices. Yampi itself is an area of exceptional biodiversity. Last year it was listed as one of 20 priority places for conservation under the Threatened Species Action Plan, and it is, it's just incredible, the amount of threatened species that are there. It exists in the sort of the melting pot of three separate bioregions: the Northern Kimberley there, the Central Kimberley, and the Dampier land. And of course, in that region there where they intermingle, you get incredible populations of golden-backed tree rats, western partridge pigeons, northern quails, golden bandicoots, brush-tailed phascogales. The list just goes on and on. In 2016, we produced the first density estimates for feral cats on Yampi, but in 2018 we developed a long-term and ongoing monitoring program in that lowland country of Yampi. We did that across 4 sites, and you can see that there on the map. 3 of those sites in particular, closer to the lowland country, traditionally hold higher cat densities. And over that time, since 2018, we've actually seen an increase in the density of feral cats at those sites, which is some cause for concern given where the threatened species are persisting in that region. Traditionally, AWC in the Kimberley has approached cat management indirectly, and this has been through obviously intricately managing the fire regime, as well as reducing the feral herbivore density and removing them from the country. And that creates a bit more of a cat inimical landscape, and promotes the persistence of those native species. However, under contract with the Department of Defence, and of course all the things that we've learnt through the adaptive management process and those increasing cat densities, we're beginning to develop a direct approach to cat management. So this is what I'll talk about here. We started last year, 2022, with some shooting, and really shooting is sort of a method that we've come up with to increase bang for your buck, really in these target areas, really specific sort of country where those threatened species are persisting. So we acknowledge that it's not the answer to large-scale feral cat removal, particularly in that sort of landscape, massive remote country. But basically the aims of the work we did last year were to determine the activity and the density of feral cats both before and after that management effort. To do this, we deployed 3 discrete camera arrays throughout the lowland country, Ubaguma, Taraji West and Taraji East, you can see there. Taraji East was our control, so we didn't conduct any shooting out at that site. And at each site there was 80 cameras per array, and each array was spaced greater than 10 kilometres apart. We left the cameras out for 12 nights before management, before shooting, and 12 nights after. We also conducted in between that 11 nights of shooting. Following bringing the cameras in, we then individually identified as many cats as we possibly could, thanks to some work done by Huey, actually, following that methodology. We then conducted GLMMs for activity and ran SECARs to determine any changes in cat density. Operationally, so the kitty bang bang of it all, we ended up, obviously working on such a large landscape scale, you've really got to target cats as best you can, particularly the time that we have. So we have the beauty, as I mentioned before, of managing the fire regime on Yampi. So we use that to our advantage. As you can see by the map there, that darker shading on the map are our fire scars that we put in earlier in the dry season. And essentially we're using those in order to drag cats into where we want them in the landscape. We can target those areas to shoot off and protect any native species that might be persisting in those areas as well. So we basically travel along those linear features where cats are known to utilise, and we used thermal and white light to detect, and then just thermal for humane removal of the cats. Obviously it'd be better if they just glowed in the dark, it'd be a bit cheaper. So what actually happened? So as I said, we spent 11 nights out there. We ended up driving about 1,500 kilometres in a buggy and in a Land Cruiser around those linear features. We detected 27 cats over that time, of which we removed 25. So a pretty good conversion rate from detection to destruction. 9 of those cats we removed from Ubaguma, as you can see there, and 16 were removed from Taraji West. So what did that actually do? Well, according to the modelling, GLMMs for activity, not a whole lot. So there was no significant effect of shooting on activity, as you can see in the graph there, and relatively consistent activity across arrays. There is a bit of a difference at Taraji East there, but of course we didn't shoot there, so that's not incorporated in the model. Similar story with density. You can see there that after shooting across all 3 sites, the numbers of cats did go down, but there's no observed modelled effect within the SECAR model. Again, you can see across those 3 sites, relatively consistent cat densities, but not a great deal of reduction after shooting. Interestingly though, the SECAR model did show that cats were moving less after shooting. So you can see average observed range length went down. The mean distance between consecutive captures also went down, as did the home range size. Most likely we'll attribute this to pretty significant rainfall that fell right smack bang in the middle of our shooting period, which was rather unseasonal. But cats being picky bastards don't like their paws getting wet, so we'll, I think that's the most likely outcome. Anyhow, so was there really no effect of shooting? Because we did observe the numbers go down that we didn't detect, or was there really just nothing going on there? I think in reality it's a little bit of both. There are some limitations that we've identified to the model and to the data going into that model, which I'm really happy to discuss with anyone who has worked with SECAR before. Obviously one of those limitations being the rate of redetection. With the window that we had the cameras out for, the redetection rate is a little low, which sort of lowers your inference power in relation to cat density and cat movement. Another thing might have been the rainfall that fell during that period and affected potentially activity and density. But in reality, we shot for 11 nights. We shot over a large area of country, and there's limitations to that as well. Obviously, we did dial it in as best we could, and we're looking at doing that on a much smaller scale in the future, particularly in relation to threatened species persistence. But there's a lot of cats out there. So where do we go from here? What are we going to do about all this? Essentially, it boils down to many of the things we've all talked about at the conference so far. And yeah, I acknowledge that this is really the start of a journey in direct cat management in an area that has significant, really significant biodiversity. So of course, increased effort. We'll start integrating some other tools as well. And of course, as knowledge evolves, we know more about those threatened species, where they are, cat movement throughout the landscape. We can, direct our efforts and target better. Thanks.
Thanks very much.